We are your home theater and AV questions answered. This is AVRant. Want your home theater or AV question answered by Tom and Rob? Send it to question@avrant.com. Welcome to another edition of AVRant. I'm Tom Andry, and I'm here with
Rob H. This is AVRant. It's your home theater and AV questions answered, and this might be the episode of superfluous noises. Tom has his door open, so there might be noises from outside of his room, and I have construction going on my apartment building right outside my window.
Dude, what's going on with that?
It's an apartment building, man. When do you not have something being worked on?
Well, it's usually, man, last time I lived in an apartment, the only thing I ever heard was leaf blowers and people arguing with each other. So
I see. No, we've got our building envelope maintenance happening. Put it off for a year because of, COVID stuff. Yeah. And so now we're playing catch up, and that's going on. So I don't know. My microphone is pretty directional, but it might pick up some of the louder, more egregious bangs.
And there goes my camera.
And there goes Tom's camera. That's great. It's at the beginning.
Back.
That's what happens. It came
back.
YouTube, hello, welcome. And there we go. AVRant, here we are.
Yes, we are here. I will tell you, for those of you that are listening, that I did get a pair of the Atlantic Technology AT-3 tower speakers in for review.
Okay.
Inexplicably. I didn't think my preview article that I wrote on AV Gadgets about them would have encouraged them to send them to me, but they did. I mean, it wasn't bad. It was just like, I don't get these speakers. Okay. So maybe they wanted me to get them, so I got them. And the review is essentially done. I apparently signed something that told them that they got to review it for technical accuracy, which is pretty common. I mean, I would have probably sent it to them anyways, but it's a little irksome that I signed it. I never read anything. That's not true. I read stuff I sign all the time, but usually these things are so pro forma that I don't really pay attention to them. But this time, it kind of bit me a little bit. But they're reviewing it. They're reviewing the review right now and supposed to be getting back to me by tomorrow. And then I will. I mean, there's nothing they can argue with in there. I didn't do anything or say anything outlandish. Or make any sort of weird claims.
These are passive speakers? They're not plug into the wall?
They're tower speakers. They have a single tweeter, single mid-range woofer, and then a folded horn on the inside. They call it an H-Pass system, blah, 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 blah. It's a folded horn on the inside with a port at the bottom.
Isn't that a transmission line?
Yeah. Yeah. So, it's fine. It's good. It's a good thing. If you want a lot of bass. But we'll talk more about it next week. But the whole point is that you get the most amount of bass in the smallest amount of cabinet, essentially, is how folded horns and transmission lines and all this stuff work. And it's a perfectly usable system. So, and there goes my camera.
Yep. It's just so reliable.
I moved. I'm sorry.
It switched to the other camera.
Let me see if I can switch it back. It is possessed by the devil.
Yep.
All right. Well, let me see if I can do this at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. To get your questions answered, all you have to do is ask. You ask by emailing us at question@avrant.com. You go to www.avrant.com. Leave us a comment there. Facebook.com/avrantpodcast. YouTube.com/avrant. You can contact Rob directly. Rob@avrant.com. His Twitter's @FirstReflect. I'm Tom at avrant.com. My Twitter's @avrant_Tom. Let's see here. I have to go. I'm on the settings page. Let me go back over here. Oh, God, Rob, your stupid face is on everything. So let's talk about our listeners of the week. To become a listener of the week, you can support the podcast in some way. One of the ways you can do that is by financially supporting us by becoming a subscribing member of our podcast community. We should give them a name, like the AV Ranters. No, it's terrible. The Ranta.
Don't try to come up with it on the spot.
AV rioters. I don't think that's politically gonna go right now.
It doesn't really say our name either.
Yeah. It doesn't either. Yeah. So the AVRant community. You can go to patreon.com/AVRant podcast and sign up there. That every month I'll take some money away from you and give most of it to us. We want to thank our 123 patrons over at patreon.com.
Indeed, yes. Thank you very much to our 123 patrons. Patreon.com/AVRant podcast for anyone who might like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation. We're just hemorrhaging patrons over here. We were up to 126 at one point. Now we're back down to 123. They're just flying away. No, it's quite all right.
Summer is right on the cusp right now. People are like,
also change of month once again, and funny how that happens, and that's really the explanation there. We do also have PayPal for anyone who wants to just do a one time. They don't want it to be automatic every month. So if you come to our website avrant.com, on the right hand side it says support AVRant. There's a picture of a cup of coffee, and that'll take you to PayPal. You don't need a PayPal account. You could just put in a credit card information, and we'll never see it. It's safe as long as PayPal is safe.
Well, I mean, it's safe.
Safe from us.
Well, okay. So
can't speak for the rest of the world.
My wife called me the other day and was like, "Did you go to 7-Eleven and buy $100 worth of stuff?" I'm like, "I think you know the answer to that question." I'm like, she said, "Yeah, did you also go to Chevron and buy $100 worth of stuff?" I'm like, "No, they didn't do anything like that." So we had to cancel my credit card and everything else. No. And I'll be honest with you, it's not a big deal, but I mean, I have not put my credit card into anything new in forever. So the only way that this happened was either it got lifted from some online service that got hacked and they haven't announced it, or I didn't pay attention to it, or it paid at a restaurant and they'll steal it that way too. I know that happens quite often. So stuff like that happens. So when I make fun of things getting stolen online or whatever, it happens to me, and I'm about as safe as you can be. I mean, and still shop online. I mean, my wife gets mad at me. She's like, "Well, we shouldn't support Amazon. We should support local." I'm like, yeah, but it's just so convenient.
And some things much easier to find.
And cheaper most of the time, which is really I do support local, especially like my bike shop. Like, I went to my bike to the bike shop yesterday. I'm like, "This is what's going on." He goes, "Well, I could fix it, but here's what you do. You do it." I was like, I don't want to do it.
I'm trying to give you money to do it for me.
Yeah. He's like, "Yeah, you don't want to pay me to do this. This will cost you too much money. It's not worth it." I'm like, What if I just bought a new one? He goes, "Nah, you don't want to do that." God, can't even give these guys money. All right, if you can't support us financially, we totally understand. It's that time of year. So if you support us in some other way, let us know what you did, and we'll mention it here. Manny supported us by sending a silver ticket, an email telling them he bought his projector screen because of our recommendation. And we got notes of gratitude for keeping the podcast going during the pandemic. From Tom, and I guess we'll put a shout out to Andy and his daughter Maggie for the heartwarming Twitter interaction. I don't know what I'm talking about here.
That was me.
I guess apparently, happy birthday, Andy.
That's is right. Happening. There you go. He'll be very pleased. He's got both of us saying it now. So,
are we supposed to say it?
That is on the record. No,
I don't remember. I don't remember looking on the PayPal thing and getting any sort of
no. It wasn't
note
PayPal.
From PayPal with the donation that
Twitter
said, "Hey,
as far as
say happy birthday."
It is well belated now.
This is like a headshot at one of those conventions. You don't just get in line and get a signature. You got to pay.
I am Ron Burgundying Tom. Just write it down, get him to say it. But
Tom will read it. Tom will read it and ask what the heck he just read afterwards.
Say a thank you to Manny for talking us up to Silver Ticket. That's very nice of you. And then, Tom and Andy and Maggie, thank you all for the notes of encouragement and gratitude, and happy birthday to Andy once again. And it was a very pleasant interaction on Twitter between Andy and Maggie.
On Twitter, there was a pleasant interaction.
Well, that's why I'm calling it out. It needs to be recognized.
You need to screenshot that because it's a unicorn. It doesn't happen. Oh yeah, I don't really tweet. I occasionally want to, and then I go on Twitter and go, "Oh right, I don't want to." But I have not seen very many positive interactions on Twitter lately. Say that. All right, in the news, Sound United announced a workaround for Denon Marantz 2020 receiver models that were unable to pass through the 8K resolution and 4K 120 signals from Xbox Series X and the newest graphic cards via their single HDMI 2.1 input. They couldn't just call it like the HDMI fix.
It was why they had to give it this whole string, but here comes the name, super memorable.
SPK, which sounds like it's a speaker. SPK618. It's a SPK. It's a speaker with a 6-inch woofer, one tweeter, and an 8-inch subwoofer as well.
Oh, that's not it. I don't know why that particular, but anyway.
Why it's called this, but SPK618 adapter sits between your HDMI 2.1 source, singular, and your Denon or Marantz 8K receiver. There's a single input and a single output with an included ultra-high-speed HDMI cable plus a power plug. If the only HDMI 2.1 device you're ever going to plug into your receiver is a PS5, then the SPK618 isn't necessary since PS5 signals were already getting through just fine. But as long as you have a valid serial number and register on the appropriate Denon or Marantz website, Sound United will send the SPK618 to you for free. So, why not? Get it. It's free. Mm-hmm. Registration opens May 15th, and they've posted a YouTube video demonstrating how to connect and set up the adapter. It's just two cables. How hard is it? Whatever.
Yeah, no, I mean,
this is like such a wasted opportunity for Denon and Marantz, for Sound United in general, but Denon and Marantz specifically. It's such a wasted opportunity.
Yes, because free, good. That's great.
Goodwill.
So that is,
people are happy. They have a fix. And it's a box.
That is fantastic. But I mean, honestly, if it had been an option, let's say, to turn this into an HDMI switch, because the backs of these 2020 AV receivers only have a single HDMI 2.1 input. They have multiple HDMI inputs, but the other 6 or 7 are all HDMI 2.0. It has a single HDMI 2.1 input. Now, if they had made an SPK618 and that had even just 2 ins and 1 out instead of only the single in and the single out, which, I mean, that's fine. That's all they promised when you bought it. When you bought it, they only said you're getting 1 input, and this maintains that. But I would have paid, I don't know, $50 for one that even just gave me 2 in, 1 out as an option. I mean, it certainly could have been a switch.
And I know HDMI 2.1, connectors or connections or boards or whatever are very scarce these days, and they're probably part of the issue why they didn't do this. But sure, everybody's going to be happy to have a solution that owns it, especially if you own a Yamaha or you're thinking of buying a Yamaha and you got a Denon Marantz. You're now a happy person. But if they had just included 1 or 2 more inputs, just as a way of saying, oops, we messed up.
Right.
I mean, it's not really our fault. We bought these things thinking that they were going to work, and they didn't work, because I'm sure they didn't make those chipsets themselves. They bought them, and that something was wrong. Yeah. That's why it's happening not just to Denon and Marantz, it's also happening to Yamaha. If they had just included a couple of more, people would have been like, not only did they make it right, but they made it right.
Yes,
not only did they give me what they promised, but they gave me more than what I promised. I am now a loyal Denon Marantz customer for life, is what they could have done by just adding 1 more input.
So
there's 2 devices out there that doesn't work with. We're giving you 2. That's all I had to do.
We've never been 100% clear on exactly why this didn't work. Why the PlayStation 5 did work and the Xbox Series X and the GeForce and ATI graphics cards didn't. However, one little clue that we picked up in that tutorial video is just that. We know that the Xbox Series X outputs at 40 gigabits per second, and the PlayStation 5 outputs at 32. And interestingly, there is a screenshot that they have where when they're feeding it through this little box, and let's all remind ourselves that when we first opened up the Xbox Series X, we immediately thought, well, where's the external brick? Because all other Xboxes used to have some kind of external brick. Well, now we have one. We have this little add-on from Denon and Marantz. That's wonderful. Now we have an external brick for our Xbox Series X.
Bricks.
But yeah, we can see that going through that, it is 32 gigabits per second now, and not 40. So I don't know if it is actually a bandwidth issue that was the problem all along, or what all. But anyway, this box makes sure that now it works with that single input on the back of your Denon or Marantz 2020 8K AV receiver.
Yeah. Meanwhile, Yamaha says they're still investigating how they will address their own HDMI 2.1 receiver models, which is the RX-A2A, the V6A, which is also the TSR-700, and the V4A. They say a future update is still in the works, but they also plan to launch completely new models within a month that are supposed to support 8K and 4K 120 pass-through without any issue. So maybe the solution is going to be, we'll give you a
we'll just replace what you bought with the new model.
Well, maybe, or trade in, trade in value. You trade in, and we'll give you,
I seem to recall some AV people last year saying that last year was a really bad time to buy an AV receiver, and that you should probably just wait a year for the ones that actually work.
Yeah, I don't know. Sounds very Nostradamus-esque of them, whoever these people were, mysterious online entities.
I wonder if that Denon Marantz box would work with the Yamahas. Because it's the same Panasonic made HDMI chips inside, so chances are. So hey, if you have a Denon Marantz and all you have is a PlayStation 5, or you have no HDMI 2.1 sources at all and don't really intend to get one, because you have to put in the serial number to get one of those ones for free. Right. So I'm sure we'll see some on eBay selling to Yamaha. I was
going to say, you might be able to make a little cheddar.
That's right.
So this comes from Carl. It's not exactly a new topic, but the lawsuit over Apple and Amazon using the word buy for Apple TV and Prime Video content were all over the news last week after a U.S. District Court judge rejected Apple's motion to dismiss a class action lawsuit based on the notion that no reasonable consumer would believe that content purchased through iTunes would remain available indefinitely. I think everybody thought that.
That was Apple's defense, which I'm kind of surprised at. I'm like, I know you guys can afford really good lawyers, and that was a part of your defense?
Yeah. So, I'm pretty sure when people purchase stuff, they expect to have it. I don't know, maybe I'm way out here. Yeah. So Amazon faces similar lawsuits over false advertising of unlimited access to Prime Video purchases. And a second class action lawsuit has also been filed against Apple, with the lead plaintiff claiming he lost access to nearly $25,000 worth of, really, dude? $25,000 worth of iTunes and App Store purchases when his Apple account was terminated. They also have the other thing that's going on in the news right now with them. I don't know if it's down below here, but
no.
Apple with the Fortnite thing.
Yes, against Epic Games. Yep.
Yeah.
And I mean the whole Senate hearing that they just had.
Right.
That went on last week as well. So yes, much is being made of the notions of these, the App Store is completely controlled by Apple. So I mean, these are all various things, what's going on with the Senate and with Epic Games. That has nothing to do with these class action lawsuits, which are about essentially defining the word buy and the word purchase.
It's just ridiculous.
That's what those ones kind of break down to. The ones in the Senate and with Epic Games, that's about antitrust. That's about saying that the App Store is a monopoly. And that, Apple gives themselves advantages that no one else has, and they set the price, and there's nothing anybody can do about it.
Yeah.
My personal opinion on that is, I mean, they're not stopping Epic Games from making their own phone, so I don't really entirely agree that the App Store, you can make your own thing. Nobody will, because it's an insane amount of money, but yeah, I mean, that's all being debated. That's fine. But, and then it's like, why did this guy's Apple account get terminated? Because we haven't heard about that. So, it's like, and I'm pretty sure in the terms of service that you never read, but you scroll through all that super fine print and then click accept at the bottom, that it absolutely says something in regard to if you do something against their terms of service and you have your account terminated, that you lose everything you bought. Like, that's in there. So I don't know how much of a case he's going to have. It'd be different if he had bought $25,000 worth of stuff and then it just disappeared inexplicably one day and never came back for absolutely no reason. But if you did something and got your account terminated, I think that's a little different, and I'm pretty sure that is covered in the terms of service. So, yeah, we'll see how these lawsuits go. However, the first one, the original one, which is just this idea that, an agreement, a license agreement expires with a studio, and now a movie that you bought, you can't get it anymore. And you clicked buy. You didn't click rent, you clicked buy, and now it's gone. That is still ongoing, and the judge did not dismiss it as Apple wanted them to do. So out of all of these, I think that kind of has the most legs and, something
not only
that
it has the most impact long term, too.
Right.
And I don't think it's going to change the fact that your movies and TV shows are going to disappear. It's just that they're going to stop using the word buy.
Well, exactly. Yeah.
They're going to have to use something else.
Well, it's like when you purchase a piece of software and it says, lifetime subscription. Well, whose lifetime? Right. I mean, it's the lifetime of the product. Once they discontinue the product, that's it. It wasn't your lifetime that you purchased the subscription to. So, it's wording like that. And so, yeah, it might very well be that the buy button goes away and it says, I don't know, short term versus long term,
And I've had this discussion with my kids quite a bit when we talk about things like Fortnite or Roblox or any of these games out there that are persistent online worlds that are essentially just ethereal, ephemeral. They just don't have that. You aren't buying a thing. Like my kid's like, oh, can I get a gift card for Roblox? I'm like, no, I'm not buying anything on Roblox. He goes, well, but I want to get this, whatever it is. I'm like, I don't care. I mean, you're not buying it. You're not going to be able to keep it forever. Oh, no, I get to keep it forever. I'm like, no, that game is going to die someday, and all of that money, everything that you spent is going to go away. You buy Legos, you may never play with them again, but they're still in your closet, okay? You buy stuff in Minecraft, and they decide to shut down the Minecraft servers, it's gone forever. And this is across everything. This is still a debate that's pretty much contained within the gaming community about loot boxes and everything else. It's starting to spill out a little bit, but there's going to be a reckoning, and it's going to be major. I mean, you're looking at companies like Activision and EA and Ubisoft and these other ones that just have these. They're just making insane amounts of money to the point that I think one of the CEOs took a half pay cut, and he's still making like $800,000 a year. Plus, he can get a bonus of up to 200% this year, depending on performance. I'm like, that's another 1.6 million. Okay, well, yeah, he's suffering. I mean, whatever. I just there's a lot of stuff going on, and it's important that we keep ourselves as informed as we can. But there's just too much stuff out there for all of us to care about all of it. We need some people to care about some of it, and some other people to care about the other ones, and then we all work together to make the world a better place.
Yeah, as far as movies and television in specifically go, I still certainly think that buying the disc, even if it's not an Ultra HD Blu-ray, if it's a regular Blu-ray, buying the disc makes the most sense because you get the digital copy too. So
for now.
Well, yeah, but I mean, no downside. I guess maybe sometimes it costs a little bit more. Sometimes, but oftentimes the version on iTunes costs every bit as much as buying the disc. So
if you're a patient person, then you can get it for cheaper in the bargain bin at Walmart for sure. That happens all the time. Okay, from Carl, more lawsuits news. The U.S. District Court of New York is allowing the case against Lowcast, brought by ABC, CBS, Fox, and NBC to move forward. Lowcast has been operating under an exemption within the Copyright Act that allows local broadcast television stations to be retransmitted to homes that are unable to receive the over-the-air signal as long as there is no for-profit charge applied. Lowcast has set themselves... Oh, my God. Sorry, I just read forward a little bit there. Lowcast has set themselves up as a non-profit that accepts monthly donations from its users. And they use geolocation to only retransmit your local broadcast, but they do so over the internet. And if you do not make any monthly donation, your viewing is interrupted every 15 minutes, asking you to donate. You can click to ignore this message and go back to viewing for free, but the networks are arguing that this constitutes a freemium-based model and that Lowcast is retransmitting without permission. Lowcast was seeking to have the lawsuit dismissed, but that didn't happen, and now the case will move forward. Dude.
So what was that one a while back that had the coin-sized antenna, and it was one antenna?
Yeah, those quarter ones. Yeah, I remember that.
One antenna per viewer.
Ari something, or I don't remember.
I'm forgetting what the name of that was, but that was them trying to get around it that way, saying that it's one antenna per viewer, and the wire just happens to be the internet. And that one got sued out of existence.
Right. And this is not long for the world.
Yeah. I mean, Lowcast has been around for a while. This lawsuit was first filed in 2019, so and they were around for about a year prior to the first lawsuit.
And then they got a reprieve for a year in 2020 when nobody wanted to see each other face to face. So they've been making money for that amount of time.
And so there is no mandatory charge, although you do get. Now the thing is, why couldn't Lowcast just say, okay, we'll take away the 15-minute bugging you for a donation thing? You just watch it as much as you want for free, and if you do want to donate, we'll allow you to, but stopping the bugging of thing, I mean, if that's all it takes for them to get around it. This whole idea that someone is like capturing an over-the-air broadcast, sending it to you over the internet. Now, if they're truly doing it for no business profit and they are limiting it to the local broadcast that you could pick up if you stuck an antenna up there anyway, like, I don't know what the case against that is. That is an exemption to the Copyright Act. You are allowed to do that.
You are, but I mean, that's just like you I mean, there's it's a lot of things that it is like, but the reality is you can't make money doing it, so no one does it. That's why it's an exemption. But they're like, well, you can do it if you want to, but you're not allowed to make any money on it. Okay, well, that's fine. Well,
I seem to recall
if you got an antenna and you send it to your friend's house, well, then that's fine.
I seem to recall that Locast had some beginnings with one of the satellite companies anyway. So this was kind of like a weird behind-the-scenes way of like digging at cable providers. There was some weirdness going on behind the scenes. I'm not going to say anything that can be quoted because I don't remember exactly, but as far as where the initial funding came from, I recall there was some hinkiness going on with that. In any case, this is not being dismissed either. So if you're enjoying Lowcast, enjoy it while you can. Chances are that those 4 gigantic networks have more money than whoever is backing Lowcast.
Yeah, they're gonna up the frequency of the donation thing because they need to fund their legal fees. It's gonna be every 5 minutes. All right, some comments from our listeners. Jay, he knows that I'm a horror movie fan, so he says to check out Willy's Wonderland, starring Nick Cage, for some Evil Dead type vibes and fun soundtrack. It's Nick Cage versus a third-rate Chuck E. Cheese knockoff. What's not to love? Where's it on?
I don't
What's
know.
it on? I don't either.
You can search for it.
I'll find it, or I won't. It doesn't matter. But I will look it up. I started watching Shadow and Bone. That seems to be pretty good on Netflix. Seems to be all right.
That's based on a book series, right?
It is. Yeah. And I'll say the only downside, I've only 3 episodes, I think, maybe 2. I don't remember. But the only downside so far is that they don't handhold you at all at the beginning, and there's a lot of names of places and names of types of people and stuff like that you're just expected to either know or figure out along the way, and watch it again the second time.
That's a bit like the first season of Handmaid's Tale, where they just drop you right in there, and it takes until about episode 6 before you start figuring out what in the heck is going on. Like, I had already read the book, so I got it, but if you were just being dropped in there,
yeah. So I think my wife is going to be interested. It has that sort of Hunger Games, Divergent, that sort of female protagonist.
Young adult.
Yeah, young adult YA novel sort of vibe to it. And my wife likes that stuff, so I told her about it. I'm like, well, listen, you're going to be confused for a little bit. You have to still pay attention. So she's not good at that. We'll see. Infinite Gary, a cool heads up for fans of the Spears and Munsell test pattern discs. Gary was able to chat via email with Stacey Spears directly, and he said they are working on a new 3-disc Ultra HD Blu-ray test pattern set that they're hoping to launch this summer. Disc 1 will be all HDR, including Dolby Vision, HDR10, HDR10 Plus. Disc 2 will be SDR, including SDR with Rec 2020 color, as well as Atmos test tones on that disc. Disc 3 will be a collection of montage and test videos in all different formats. But best of all, most of the test patterns will now have helpful pop-up help descriptions to tell you what you should be looking for and how to adjust your display settings. They're also hoping to produce some YouTube tutorials to really dig into individual patterns and adjustments this fall. So that's a thing. That's exciting.
Yeah, I mean, that was going way back to the very first Spears and Munsell test disc, which I think that was DVD, wasn't it?
It is DVD. I have it.
Yeah, it wasn't even Blu-ray. But like back then, it really was just a collection of test patterns. Like it gave you
it
no
gives
instruction.
You no information. Yes, really, it's quite bare bones.
Yes. So this now actually providing pop-up instructions, I think, is very much more consumer friendly, because I mean, they were always targeted at professionals. They were targeted at professional calibrators and that, but now they're like, no, we're going to make this a little bit more consumer friendly. I think that's fantastic. Supporting all the HDR formats, although they didn't mention specifically HLG. I don't know if there will be any HLG footage on there. Just because we didn't hear it from this interaction doesn't mean there isn't, but that wasn't specifically mentioned, so I don't know. And then no mention of DTS-X either, just Atmos. Right. But again, doesn't mean there absolutely isn't. There might be, just didn't hear about it yet. But regardless, I like this. This is a good thing.
What ended up happening with the Spears and Munsell's other disc set is that you got to learn certain test tone patterns, and you knew what they did and how to use them correctly. Yeah. And then you just used, so there was 2, 3, 4, I don't remember, there's a whole bunch of discs. And you would end up just using like 5 or 6 test patterns and be done.
There was no reason to use more than that on there.
Way more than you needed. And, they tested specific things and everything else and blah, blah, blah. But, All right, David Katzenmeyer from CNET posted his findings after testing the new color balance feature for Apple TV. If you're using an inaccurate picture mode, which you shouldn't be, it does improve the white balance, bringing it closer to D65. That lines up with the findings from one of our Twitter followers, Budget Videophile, who took issue when we said that the color balance essentially does nothing, since they saw an obvious shift in the white balance after running it and toggling it back and forth. So the more accurate white balance is a net positive. However, David points out that, according to his measurements, it did not make any significant changes to the color points. It did not adjust gamma or overall light output. And most importantly, if you put it in the right picture mode, it's better than doing this.
Well, I mean,
basically, put it in the right picture mode and then do this, and you'll say, "I don't really say anything." And
sure,
yeah.
I mean, one good example that he included a very inexpensive Insignia TV, where even in its most accurate out-of-the-box picture mode, which was its movie mode, it still had a quite inaccurate white point. So there, that was the TV in its most accurate picture mode out of the box, and this color balance feature did make an improvement, at least in the white point. So it's possible, it could be useful, but it's white point only. It doesn't adjust the coordinates of your color primaries. Like I mentioned, Twitter last week, Chris Heinonen measured that it did make a very small amount of adjustment to some of the secondaries, which kind of makes sense because that's the relative mix of your three primaries. You got your red, green, and blue primaries, and then your cyan, yellow, and magenta secondaries. And the cyan, yellow, and magenta are created by mixing two of the primaries. So if you are changing the amount of red, green, and blue to change the white point, that should kind of automatically change cyan, yellow, and magenta a little bit, and that's pretty much what he found. But it's not, it's not a full color calibration. It's not moving those. Right. It's not a calibration to your room conditions because it isn't adjusting the overall light output. It isn't adjusting the gamma, your shadow detail, any of those things. This is basically white balance only. And you know what? That's fine. If it's improving, some of the worst white balance out of the box settings that are out there, and this is improving that by 30 seconds of holding your phone up to your TV, okay, I'm fine with that. But I don't particularly want people thinking that this is the equal of a professional calibration. Why should I pay someone $400 to bring in, $30,000 worth of test equipment to calibrate my TV? Well, because this is not the
I
equal.
I spent $1,000 on my phone.
Yeah.
So. Yeah. All right, let's get to the questions here. Terry says this is a Chinese brand called ToneWinner. They just took an AV term and put winner after it. But whatever. That started exporting to Europe and North America just a couple of years ago. One Canadian-U.S. retailer, Summit Hi-Fi, has partnered up with them. They got ToneWinner to ship their amplifiers directly to North American customers, and they've created their own Summit Hi-Fi amplifier models that ToneWinner builds for them. They appear to be virtually identical to Emotiva's designs, except they put a VU meter on the front, which is mislabeled, and I almost misspoke it as UV on the front because but the Chinese doesn't. That's not. It's a Chinese brand, right? They don't go left right to left. They go left to right. Right? It's Japanese that goes right to left.
Japanese definitely goes right to left. I'm not sure about Chinese writing.
I don't know. Maybe
I think Chinese writing goes right to left because it was the same.
Maybe that's why it does that. Maybe
top to bottom development. Yeah. But in any case, it should be a VU. Volumetric unit is what VU stands for. So, not UV. It's not ultraviolet. But anyway, if you look at the back of the ToneWinner amplifiers, they are identical to the backs of the Emotiva amplifiers, at least in design, although they don't seem to have the slots for moving sort of like the blades of each individual
in and out
thing. It's pre-built.
So what really caught Terry's attention was the ToneWinner AT-300 Pre-Pro for only $1,200. It's listed as 16-channel, although it goes on to describe that's actually 13.1 with 3 subwoofer outputs. So you could connect 9.3.4, 7.3.6, but not 9.1.6.
Yeah, so it's not 15.1. It is potentially as much as 13.3, although that's a little bit suspect too. But we'll dig into that in a moment.
Okay. It does Dolby Atmos and DTS-X, no Dirac or Odyssey, but they say they have their own auto setup and EQ as well as manual 7 to 11 band EQ adjustment. You have to do 7. but no more than 11.
Well, I think you get 11 for the subwoofers and 7 for the speakers, or vice versa, perhaps. I'm not sure exactly which way that goes.
So that's for each channel. HDMI is limited to 2.0, but Terry is using a projector anyways. The one YouTube channel that has covered these ToneWinner products from Summit Hi-Fi, I guess it's from Summit Hi-Fi, but otherwise, information is scarce and speculation in the forums doesn't seem trustworthy. Can we shed any light on this brand in general and the AT-300 Pre-Pro in particular? All right. So, I mean, this is the first I'm seeing it.
Sure. Now, I mean, ToneWinner has been around for, I think it's like 17 years or something like that. They're not a brand new company by any means, but they weren't selling under the ToneWinner brand name in North America. Now, there's all the speculation because, yes, the designs of their amplifiers, by all specs and outward appearance, except for that VU meter on the front instead of little LEDs that light up when you get close to clipping, appear identical.
Wow, these look exactly like
appear identical to Emotiva. Now, there's a very good reason for that, which is that Emotiva is like what they build and sell is based upon another company's designs. That company is Jade Audio. Right? Jade Audio and Jade Designs, they're the ones doing the design work, and they sell those designs or commission manufacturing companies to actually physically build and sell Jade designed products. Now, I mean, Jade is owned and run by the same people who own and run Emotiva, right? So they are like vertically integrated companies. And Emotiva, 4 years ago, moved all of their manufacturing to, or at least assembly, to the United States. They used to have their products assembled in China and then ship them over. Now they're having all the assembly done in the United States. Well, ToneWinner was previously who built the Emotiva stuff based on Jade Audio Designs, and now they're continuing to build those in China, but now they're just selling them under the ToneWinner brand. So that's what's going on. That's why they look the same, because it has the same fundamental design. It's Jade Designs that designed the amplifiers, and it's just two different companies doing the manufacturing, one of them in China, one of them in the United States, or doing the assembly anyway. So yeah, I mean, nothing wrong with that. And in fact, the prices, even after you import them into North America, the prices of the ToneWinner versions are less expensive than Emotiva. But they're not exactly identical. Like I mentioned, the ToneWinner ones do not have the replaceable blade designs on the amplifiers. The channel count that you buy is the channel count that you have. There's no changing it after the fact, which you can kind of sort of do with Emotiva. You can ship it back to them and they'll swap out. So, it's not identical. But when it comes to this AT-300, the Pre-Pro, so it's kind of interesting because there is no Emotiva equivalent to this, and ToneWinner doesn't have an equivalent to the RMC1 or XMC2, which are full 16-channel Pre-Pros, and those are the ones that Emotiva are selling. ToneWinner doesn't have those, and then Emotiva doesn't have an AT-300 equivalent. Now, given the price point, given the size, given the design, all indications are that the AT-300 is using a system-on-chip design that can do up to 13.1 channels. That would be the same thing you're finding in the Denon Marantzes that can go up to 13.1 channels. It's that same system on chip, and that's why it's limited to that instead of the full 15.1. The design that Emotiva is using in their 15.1 channel Pre-Pros, that's a different design that is like proprietary to them. They've had lots of issues with it, and this one is the system on chip design. The 3 subwoofer thing, I'm like, is it? It has 3 subwoofer outputs. It has 1 XLR subwoofer output and 2 RCA outputs, but there's no mention of those actually being independent. Like, as far as I can tell, there is 1 subwoofer channel, and it just happens to feed 3 separate outputs.
It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just
not
what it is.
Not necessarily a bad thing, but yeah, I think calling it 16 channel is not exactly true.
This sort of screams that you're going to have to buy a Dirac.
Well, yeah, I mean, the auto setup is, do you remember EmoQ back before Emotiva was using Dirac? Yeah, that's what this is. It's EmoQ, which is very similar to like Onkyo Accu EQ, which is a fairly simple system. It's parametric EQ based. It's not for filters. So it's pretty basic, but it should get your levels and distances set just fine, and then the actual equalization is questionable. But the limitations that you'd be facing with the AT-300, the only instance where you would actually be able to use 13 speakers with this AT-300 is Atmos, like an actual Atmos soundtrack. And there you could set it up to have 6 overheads or have front wides included with. So you got a 7.1.4 and then you add front wides to it, or you have 7.1.4 and you add top middles to have 6 overheads. Either or, not both, one or the other. And that's the only instance where you could use that, because this doesn't let you put sound into front wides via the Dolby Surround Up mixer. So you're not going to be able to do that. This is DTS-X. It's not DTS-X Pro. So DTS-X is topping out at 11 speakers maximum. And DTS Neural X Up Mixer is topping out at 11 speakers maximum. So the only time you're going to actually use 13 speakers with this thing is a genuine Atmos soundtrack, not from any up mixing, not from anything DTS. So, I mean, the price, like $1,300, $1,200, $1,300, it's certainly the least expensive of something that can go beyond 11 speakers, but it can only go beyond 11 speakers for one type of soundtrack. That's it. And is that really worth it when you could get, say, even just a Denon X3700H, put that into preamplifier mode, and that one will actually, let you use, okay, hold on. You'd have to go, no, I'm completely wrong on that. Strike what I said there. You'd have to go to like an X6700H, which is more expensive. To actually do the 13. And that one lets you upmix, Dolby Surround Up Mixer. They've implemented front wides into that. They've got DTS-X Pro on that. So that's what you'd be paying for. But yeah, that is like double the price. So, okay. Yeah, this is the least expensive thing kind of out there that'll let you go beyond 11, but it's very restricted in how it can go beyond 11, and then you're not getting like a really good auto EQ program with it. So kind of interesting. From the like 2 people who've ever posted reviews, one of them was saying it's kind of working fine for them. They're using it with a projector. Another person said, yeah, they've had glitches. They've had HDMI glitches with it for sure, which is the same as what's happening with Emotiva. So if this is all Jade Design, I can't say I'm super shocked about that. And I wouldn't be surprised if it has some HDMI glitches, because those are pretty common. Plus, there is no upgrading this thing to HDMI 2.1. It's stuck where it is. So I can't say I'm gung-ho about it, because I think it has quite a few limitations. The whole point of this thing would be to go beyond 11 speakers. And then the HDMI is limited too, and the audio EQ is very limited. And then I'm not like super against it because the price is very attractive. But that's where I land on this thing, Terry.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how much it would cost to add a DRAC, to any DSP to this to make it work. And it's
the 8-channel, if you're not worried about implementing DRAC on your overhead speakers, and honestly, why would you be? The 8-channel, so you can do your 7 floor level and a subwoofer. That's $1,000, right, from mini DSP.
Right.
At which point, you're at $2,300, but if you prefer DRAC versus Odyssey, DRAC on 7.1 of your speakers versus Odyssey on all 13.1, but it's trade-offs. Right. It's definite trade-offs.
Right. Speaking of which, I switched the speakers out, the tower speakers out for my bookshelves, but I haven't had a chance to rerun Odyssey.
Oh, okay.
I'm just waiting for anybody else to know this, because I'm sitting here, I'm like,
have you turned Odyssey off, or you were still using the old?
No, I'm still using the old one, and just
the correction for your different brand of bookshelf speakers is being applied.
Yeah, bookshelf speaker is being applied. Yes, and it sounds fine, because they're both fairly flat speakers. Sure. That didn't bother me that much. But they are now the left and rights are getting like so much more power than they need. So much louder and everybody. Nobody's noticed.
See. Oh, so they're more efficient then. The towers are more efficient.
Yeah, I think they're 6 ohms. So
that too.
But yeah, plus their towers. So Michael's our YouTube guy.
You didn't have any thoughts on ToneWinner?
Oh, did I have any thoughts?
Yeah.
I mean, okay, so I'm not speaking about this product specifically, but in general, this is not something that is uncommon. You know, you OEM something, you have somebody build it for you, especially if they build it in China. You just got to expect, unfortunately, because of how lax the rules are over there, that they're going to start making more of it and selling it under a different brand. Now, the difference is that Emotiva and the parent company here has a reputation to maintain internationally, which means that they will be much more strict about quality control. So not only are you dealing with, so somebody could take, you know, no matter what you're good at, you choose. You know, I can build a chair, I can, you know, design a bridge or whatever. They can take what you did and then just hand it to somebody else as their work, but they don't know necessarily what's important as far as making sure that the quality stays consistent throughout the entire process. So whenever I see a knockoff brand like this,
well, I can't say that. This isn't a knockoff. Yeah, right. This isn't like they stole somebody's design. They're working with Jade. They're using Jade's designs. That's the original designer, and then, you know, they're purchasing their components and assembling it in China, and that allows them to do so at a lower price than doing so in America. So this is not a knockoff. Can't call them that.
Right. So in general, when you see a product that's identical to another product, that's the big name product, you're paying for the name. You might be paying for them to assemble it someplace else or, you know, construct it someplace else. But a lot of times you're also paying for quality control. So you need to keep that in mind as well. And what Rob's talking about as far as, you know, it's got some limitations that are, you know, maybe not obvious by just looking at the specs, you know, that sort of all plays into it as well. So, I have no interest in this product whatsoever. I mean, personally.
Yeah, I just don't. It's that weird thing of, you know, like $1,200 for a pre-pro that for one type of signal can go beyond 11 speakers. It's like, well, there's something to that because nothing else can do it at that price in North America. So it's unique and it has some value by coming in at that price, but because it is so limited, it's like, is it worth it? Is it really, even though it's cheaper, is it worth it? Yeah, it's questionable.
All right. So Michael, our YouTube guy. Hey, Mike. First up, he says he listened to episode 571.
751.
751, whatever. 750. I don't really have dyslexia, I don't think, but I mean, I do that all the time. Where we answered his questions 3 times, and he's very grateful for our discussion. You listened to the whole thing or just our answers? Because I don't know. Listened to the whole thing.
I think he probably listened to our section that was just about his questions.
All right. So he's going to take our advice and bring in a pair of SVS Prime bookshelf speakers to compare to his ELAC Debut 2.0 speakers right away, and he'll downsize from the SVS SB3000 for his roughly 13 by 13 foot room with a closet. He appreciated our advice on acoustic treatments. He has some questions. Before we go on, I was on Reddit, and before you go on, I know I shouldn't be on Reddit, because I was on Reddit and somebody had a 13 by 14 foot room with a PB2000 in it, and he was complaining that he didn't have enough mid bass, and he was going to buy 2 of these massive subwoofers. And I was like, first of all, subwoofers don't play mid bass. Let's just start with that. But second, your problem is not that your subwoofer is not big enough. That PB2000 absolutely can crush this room. You need another one, or actually, my advice was like get a SB1000. I mean, it's a 12 by 13 foot room. You are not. This is the size of the sub is not the problem. And then somebody responded back, and I didn't engage because I don't. Somebody responded back, well, you know, there's I did respond to this one. I'm sorry. You know, well, you know, something the other, you know, the PB2000 something, you know, can't get loud. You know, he can't get it loud enough in this room. I'm like, how much louder does it need to be? He's already got it at reference level. Anything beyond reference level is wasted. I mean, headroom in subwoofers is.
I mean, if they want the car audio, you know, 130 decibels, then okay.
Yeah, but even that, right? So this PB, he's got SB3000, the 13 by 13
he was thinking
room.
about SB3000 just because he had read reviews about them.
So I just wrote an article. It's not going to get published for a while, but I just wrote an article yesterday based on this whole thing, and I'm like, when you buy a sub that's too big for your room, what you're buying is the luxury of turning the bigger sub down. It's like instead of putting it on 6, you get to put it on 4. Mm-hmm. Ooh, don't you feel special? Anyways, yeah. So this small room does not need a SP3000, though. I mean, if you really want it, buy it. So the DIY panels and kits we suggested are all absorption only. Is that okay, or should he have some diffusion in his room as well? I am of the opinion, and I will continue to be of the opinion, that you are going to have a hard time, especially with a hardwood floor, my sir, hitting the amount of absorption that you need in order that you over-absorb this room to the point where you're thinking, I need some diffusion now. It's unlikely to happen in this scenario, in most scenarios, and I would venture to say all scenarios. I know Rob has some diffusion in his room, and he says it has helped. I have very rarely been in a room that had diffusion, and I never thought to myself, well, that's making a big difference. The absorption makes the difference, and the diffusion is if you somehow have a weirdness in your room that can't be corrected by absorption, or you've already hit that 30% absorption mark and you want to still put some more stuff in there.
It's the it's the particular range of frequencies, because diffusion acts over a fairly small and definitely higher frequency range.
Right.
That's where it has an effect. It has no effect on bass whatsoever, and virtually no effect on the vast majority of the mid-range. It's really the treble frequencies, and then even just a section of that where diffusion has an impact. What I think would probably help you most, because I think he wants something that's going to convince him of what he really needs in this room. There is a video. It was out years and years and years ago. It's just called Hearing is Believing, Ultimate Small Mixing Room. And it's not so much that, of course, you're using your room as a mixing room, but similar dimensions to what a lot of mixing rooms are. And what's good about this video is that they go through the process of playing several pieces of music, little short clips, with the room completely untreated, and then with the room treated with absorption only, and then the room treated with even more panels, the additional panels on top of the original absorption being combo absorption and diffusion panels. Now, that's really important to know, because when you listen critically on a good pair of headphones, you can hear a difference between the absorption only versus the fully kitted out room, where they literally covered almost every surface except for all of the ceiling. There's some on the ceiling, but all the walls are completely covered in some kind of panel, so which is a little bit overboard. But it's important to know that the additional panels beyond the first set, they are diffusion, but they're combo diffusion and absorption. And a lot of what you hear in that comparison is that they added even more absorption as well as some diffusion. It wasn't that diffusion alone made the difference. But the real thing is that when you hear the difference between the completely untreated versus the absorption only room, that is the huge change.
That's a massive difference.
That's a huge change. Whereas the change from absorption to even more absorption and some diffusion on top of that, there is an audible change, but it is a much smaller change than from no treatment at all to only absorption. I think that will help convince you of where the money is best spent. They also show measurements, which is helpful to see too.
I'll be honest with you. For the most part, I feel like if you're going to get, first of all panels should be absorption panels. Now that we've got the combo panels, because we never used to have that. We used to have either absorption or diffusion, and people are like, should I get some diffusion panel? No, just stick with absorption. But now that we have both, if you really want to just break up the look of having all these panels all over your room, get some combo panels, and then Bob's your uncle. That's fine. But
you can do what Andrew did and get those 2x4 lattice things that were meant to make a fence and put those on the top of your panels.
I keep meaning to go to Home Depot and see if I can find those.
Right,
but
not that those are. Yeah, those are not mathematically calculated diffusion panels, diffusion scattering plates. They are mostly for the looks. But yeah, I mean, when you have those, the big, I'm talking about the 16-inch deep quadratic calculated diffusers. Those are for a specific issue that You are only going to use them if you have done extensive, thorough measurements of your room and detected that in that particular frequency range where those diffusers are going to be effective, that there is some improvement to be had. When we're talking about, setting up a home theater in a spare room and what you want is good sound and bang for buck, that is absorption all the way. Like there's really no confusion about that in my mind. Could it be refined potentially even further by some specifically designed diffusion panels that are just for your room and just for your speaker setup and just for your listening possession? If you did really extensive, thorough measurement, it's possible. I'm not saying that absorption only is going to literally be the be all end all, but bang for buck, no question. There is no debate there. Absorption.
Well, the problem is that most people who ask us this question aren't anywhere near 30%, and they're never going to get there. So the answer is always the same. But the reality is, yes, there are times where a diffusion would be beneficial. In my old home office, which was a 11 by 10 foot room, where I had like 23 4 foot by 2 foot by 4 inch thick panels, floor to ceiling, straddling all the corners, straddling the corners of the room in the top corners and all across the ceiling. I could have used some diffusion in that room. Okay? There's no doubt about that. Because that was one dead room. You went in there and you're like, it was just, I liked it because it kept everything very, very quiet. I could do my podcast. I didn't have to worry about many of the sounds from outside, even though I did because I saw the door that sounds would come through, and I didn't have a panel on my door. But that's the lengths you have to go before I start thinking you need some diffusion. So the answer is always bass traps, because your problem is that you don't have enough absorption in your room, and I only have to see your room to know that's the case. Yeah. And this is not talking to Mike specifically, it's just in general. So he has seen bass traps, quote unquote. Is that a completely different kind of panel? It is not. It is just thicker, basically.
It is a thicker absorption panel. Yeah.
Usually, when they start talking about bass traps, they're usually 6 inches or maybe more thick. And that's when you start talking bass traps. At least 4, right? So Acoustimac, they're 4-inch panels. They'll call a bass trap. They're 2-inch panels. They'll just call it an absorption panel. But to really be a bass trap, you need like 6 inches. Whereas like Gicks, they're like 5 3/4 inches, and like 1.5 inches of that is an air gap. So the insulation itself is like 4 inches thick. Okay, but they build that air gap into there, and it almost ends up being a 6-inch front to back thickness panel. And that would be a bass trap. But it's still absorption. It is just absorption. It just is thicker. Now the thing is, there are more sophisticated bass traps that have a membrane, or in fact are a tuned resonant tube themselves, which is like, it's almost like having a passive subwoofer on the other side of your room, but only for one specific frequency. Helmholtz resonator. Helmholtz resonator.
Right. Or the panels that do have a membrane on there, where that membrane vibrates at certain specific frequencies and its harmonics, and that counteracts if you have a narrow trough or peak in your frequency response. It's that one specific frequency, then that's where a tuned membrane of some type might help you.
And I really thought that those things were going to be like the thing until we figured out how to place subwoofers properly.
Just buy the second subwoofer.
But the problem with those, so what they do, if you think about it, so bass is bouncing around your room, and then it interacts with itself, and then you'll get these peaks and you get these troughs, right? We've talked about this 1,000 times, just like dropping stones into water. It bounces, those real ripples sometimes hit each other and make each other higher, and sometimes they cancel each other out. Well, the idea with that resonator is that you're like, I have a real problem at 55 hertz. So you get one that's tuned to 55 hertz. You put it in your room. Whenever 55 hertz hits, it starts to vibrate and make noise. And that idea there is that now you've got a second point, because when these things were really popular, you had a single subwoofer, or both of them up front, which is essentially the same as having a single
And then you
subwoofer.
Almost always put the Helmholtz resonator on the back wall.
That's right.
The subwoofer was on the front wall.
And then it would vibrate in sympathetic vibrations and send out that note, which would then fix that problem by making more sound. Or you could just move your other sub to the back of the room.
So yeah,
but we didn't know that at the time.
There is that distinction there. That type of bass trap, the tuned bass trap, that is different. That isn't just a thicker absorption panel. But in general, like particularly if you go to Acoustimac and you look up their bass traps, they're just absorption panels that happen to be thicker than the panels that they call absorption panels.
So he says he's got 2 windows plus the closet doors. He can't really mount panels to those. So what should be done about those spots? I'll tell you what I would do, and that is you got a lot of wall left.
Yes.
You didn't run out of the wall, did you? So put them all on the wall and don't worry about those doors and windows.
Right.
You could use freestanding panels. You could hang something in front of it. You could do a lot of stuff. But the reality is you got more wall than you have doors and windows.
Right.
So you're not going to run out of wall before you come to us and say, every square inch of wall and ceiling is covered, and now I have the doors and the windows left. What should I do with them? I would say put some diffusion on them because you got too much absorption.
Yeah, no. Acoustimac and GIK, they both do sell freestanding panels. I mean, if you absolutely, that's the only place you're going to put a panel happens to be right in front of a window, then there are options. The freestanding panels from GIK are 5 feet tall. The Acoustimac ones, yeah, I think those are actually 5.5 or 6 feet tall. They look a little bit taller, but yeah, you've got those options. You can also just, add feet to an existing panel. That wouldn't be, tall. It'll only be 4 feet tall, but you can do that. But yeah, looking at your room, I'm like, yeah, there's not really a particular reason why panels must go where your 2 windows and your 1 closet door are.
I could see one reason, but we're going to come up to it with the next question. But
sure.
Go on.
Yeah, I mean, you've got enough space elsewhere in your room that you can treat the rest of your wall surfaces, and you'll be just fine.
Yeah. So he says, would we recommend putting his TV and front speakers on the wall with the door or on the opposite wall with the window? So the wall with the door, it's you walk in and directly in front of you, you're like if the TV was on that wall, the door would be to the front left, on the front left wall of the front wall. And you would walk in and you'd be looking at a little partial wall in front of you where the closet is.
Juts into the room, yeah.
And then if you flipped it 180 degrees, then there would be a window in the front left corner and a window on the front on the right wall in the front right corner because they're kind of right next to each other. And then to the right of you would be that closet wall. My suggestion, I think, is it would be better to put them, because it's an even room, right? 13 by 13.
More or less, yeah, pretty close.
Yeah. I would put it on the wall next to the TV.
The wall next to the TV.
The wall next to the wall next to the door. The TV next to the door. Yes. And the reason is it lets you walk in past that speaker and come into the room without and it gives you the most space up front to separate your speakers out because you're so that your speakers will be on the outsides of whatever couch you're going to have in here. If you put them on the other wall, you're going to end up having to put the speaker in front of that window, which means freestanding panel behind it, hopefully, or something along those lines.
Yep.
And then it narrows in because the wall for the closet is going to narrow in that wall. It's going to narrow, give you less ability to kind of adjust where your speakers are going to be.
Yeah, this might have been the very reason he was concerned, because he might have been thinking that he wants to put the TV on the wall with the window, and then his first reflection points become his closet door and the window on the left side wall.
Right.
There would be the window behind his front left speaker. I'm
not convinced there's not more door past that closet door. I mean, more wall past that closet door.
Oh, there's more wall past the closet door that we're not seeing in the photo, but...
I think you're saying because to the right of him, his couch would be the closet door is what you're thinking.
Well, pretty much, yeah. I mean,
okay.
It'd be over there. So anyway, regardless,
yeah, go ahead.
I'm in agreement with Tom that I would put the TV on the door that is like the same wall that is the entrance door. That's where I would put the television. And the front of your room will, because of the closet, be a bit wider than the back of your room, but that is the way I would orient things.
Yeah. Front right corner is your sub, your one sub, and back left corner is your second sub.
Could be.
If you decided to put, switch it and put it so that your TV was on the wall with a window, I wouldn't worry about I would not worry about a freestanding panel. I would take a panel, buy it, put a little rubber insulation tape or some kind of rubber stopper at the top corners and lean it against that window frame or whatever.
Sure.
And just Bob's your uncle. I wouldn't mind I wouldn't pay extra to put it all stand on the dang thing. You could just lean it up against that wall. It's going to work just fine. Scrolling. In the living room where he has his ELAC speakers right now, he's about 10 feet away from those. He'll be sitting closer to the TV and speakers in the theater setup. So when he's comparing the SVS Prime speakers to his ELACs in the living room, it's important to sit closer so that it's more similar to the distance he'll have in the theater. If I had my druthers, as Rob likes to say, I would have you set up the home theater room before you started comparing speakers.
Right, yeah. Bring a pair of your ELACs upstairs, and
I would
do
get
it
my
all
panels
in the
made. I would get the, you know what I mean?
Right.
If you could, in a perfect world, I would have, and you don't have to buy the TV yet, but I would have the couch. Mm-hmm. I would have the room, the panels in the room, the way that I was going to have them set up, and then I would compare the speakers, because it's not what you're going to hear downstairs in this living room, which is not treated and not similar to what your home theater is going to be, is not going to give you an accurate representation.
Of
how many times on this
in the theater,
right? How many times have we heard people talking about that they bought X speakers that we've recommended? They're like, they don't sound very good. Well, where you got them? Well, I have them in my living room, which is open to my kitchen and to my dining room, and it's tile floors with cathedral ceilings, and I'm sitting 10 feet away, and they're above a fireplace on a brick mantle. I was like, jeez. Well, yeah, of course they're not going to sound good. You've got them in a highly reflective environment with no absorption anywhere. Well, what can I do to make them sound better? Nothing.
Yeah. Well, change the room. Change the room would be the answer. But yeah, I mean, the thing is, if the room is just, there isn't going to be a convenient way to bring the speakers upstairs and try them in the room that will be the theater. The only place you're going to be able to audition them is down in the living room. I mean, the precise distance from the speakers, it's not really going to be the thing that changes it. If you're used to the way your ELACs sound in the living room from 10 feet away, try the SVS Prime bookshelf speakers in those same spots from the same distance. Have a listen to that. But do be aware that once you get them into the theater, you might have a different, we would expect you to have a different experience, because the room acoustics significantly change the way that the speakers will sound. But if it's just about doing a one-to-one comparison and you're not going to be able to bring them upstairs, concerning yourself about the exact distance you are from the speakers, that's not the thing. So leave them where you are, leave the seats where they are in the living room, and you can do it that way.
Yeah. Jason says, what do we think about Venue by Scenex?
That is how they say to pronounce it.
N-E-X.
I mean, I would have called it X-Cine-X because it looks like X-Cine-X, but they say they are pronounced Scene-X, but whatever. The product is Venue. We'll just call it that.
Yeah. So anyways, it's a streaming box with a camera that mounts on the top of your TV. Their idea is to sell tickets just like you would at a box office to allow customers to watch first-run movies and live concerts at home. The camera does a head count, and it pauses the stream if it detects more people in the room than the number of tickets purchased. Wow, this went way in a different direction than I thought it was going to go. Ticket prices would be set by the content providers. No major studios have been announced as partners yet. They had initially hoped to launch in 2020. Boy, you missed an opportunity there. Now they are saying Q4 2021. Do we like the idea? Do we think it's terrible? It's a terrible idea. That's what I think. I'll be honest with you. I thought this was going to go a completely different direction. I thought this was going to be, you sign up, then you become part of the audience. The camera, streams you to so that the people that are performing have like a live audience that they can see, which of course is going to be nothing but body parts that you don't want to see. So that I could see, I could see how that I could see how that could go off the rails really quick. But stopping the stream because somebody walked into the room, like my dog walks through the room, and you're like, I'm sorry, there's too many people here. I'm sorry. Could you just roll tape? Stop it. This is a terrible
they promised
idea.
They aren't doing facial recognition. They promised they aren't recording anything from that camera. They promised the camera is not on until it's movie time and you activate it. Those are all the promises. Now, I mean, all of this, it can't be tested. They don't have any partners yet. And I think there's a very good reason they don't have any partners yet, because look, Disney Plus has already shown that they can make a lot of money by just setting a static price on their streaming service that they own and being like, you pay us this money, you get to watch the movie. I mean, premium video on demand has already been around for a while. Now, during the pandemic, that was the first time that we started seeing a large number of day and date premium video on demand. Usually there was a wait window. So this is all about getting around the wait window. I'm like, I think we're already done, and without the camera and without a brand new service that everybody has to sign up.
This is a DOA product.
Right.
If this had launched at the beginning of 2020, people would have been talking about it.
Sure.
People would have been at least entertaining the idea.
Right.
There's no force on earth. They could give me one of these things that when it come out of the box.
I mean, now that Disney has decided that Black Widow can come out as, on Disney Plus, day and date.
I'm getting it too.
You pay the Premier Access. The one base price, watch it as many times as you want. It's going to end up on Disney Plus as part of the regular subscription anyway, but you get it, in advance, day and date, as when it's going to be theaters, as many people as you want. Watch it as many times as you want on Disney Plus. They have no mention of what the quality of Venue was going to be. Was it going to be 4K HDR? Was it going to be, similar to Bravia Core up at 80, megabits per second? No idea. Was it going to be Atmos audio? No idea. None of this stuff. They missed their opportunity. That's what I think about Venue, and I see no putting the genie back in the bottle now. Warner Brothers experimenting with HBO Max. Again, day and date, all their 2021 movies coming out on HBO Max, day and date, and you don't even have to pay extra for those. They just show up for that month.
Yeah.
I'm like,
they're desperate to get you to sign up for HBO Max. It's not going to work for me.
I mean,
you have to come up with something better than.
Do you honestly see Disney or Warner Brothers signing up with Venue to do it now when they've already done what they've done? Not a chance.
You see how much money they made on Hamilton alone?
Right.
Hamilton, and they just released that because they wanted to get more viewers. They're like, we're hoping that within the first couple of years we'll have 100 million views. Yeah, we've got 250 million accounting or whatever it is that they've got. It's ludicrous.
They were saying what convinced them to do Black Widow was Raya and the Last Dragon. Did really well. Premier Access, it did really well for them, and they're like, well, let's give it a go.
Yeah, I'm excited. So I actually sat and had but my wife and I were walking around downtown just getting some exercise and hanging out with my youngest son who likes to do that as well. So we were walking around and we're talking about it. I'm like, listen, this is I've been we had the discussion that you and I had on the podcast not so long ago where I was like, I got to get it out of my head that $30 is a lot of money to stream a movie. Because it's not. It's not when you consider
the whole family. It really isn't.
Well, for our family, I'm like, we could do 3, 4, maybe 5 movies that way,
right?
And still break even,
right?
And she's like, and my wife's an engineer, right? So she's got the old maths thing down. I said maths, that's right.
Yeah,
doing it, and bringing it to the U.S. and. She's like, yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I'm like, so I said, if we want them to keep doing this, we got to start, doing it.
Give them more money.
I don't necessarily want to, do it for Cruella or whatever, unless I hear good things about it. But, I'm definitely doing it for Black Widow just because of this.
I think a lot of people will do it for Black Widow.
Yeah, I think they're going to make a lot of money, I hope. Will has a BenQ HT-3550 projector. He's got an inexpensive ceiling mount from Amazon, but would like a better mount that is lower in profile since his ceiling is low and has the ability to make very fine pitch and roll adjustments. He knows we've mentioned mounts with worm gears. He's looked at Chief, which is a good mount company, but tends to be pricey. And he says those are pricey. What do we suggest? I suggest you listen to what Rob's going to say as I go get more coffee.
All right. So Will alluded to this in his email that he knows we mentioned another brand that wasn't Chief, but he couldn't recall it, and it's Peerless. Peerless is the brand that we talk about often that has some very nice, very good quality with exceedingly granular adjustment via the worm gears. And so, Peerless is the brand that we've talked about. Now, the one that we most often recommend is their PRG mount. I wouldn't call it it's certainly not flush to the ceiling, but you can just take what's shown in the diagram. You can extend it via a threaded pipe, but you don't have to. You can attach the base directly to the ceiling and then adjust the worm gears for the roll and pitch. But that is $150. For the PRG. Now, they have another model called the PRGS, which even just looking at it, you can tell it's not quite as bulky. It actually might be a little bit closer to flush. It's still not a perfectly flush mount, but might even be a little bit shallower depth. It's only $90 for the PRGS. It does have like the turning adjustment. It has the knobs, and you can put a screwdriver in there too to be a little bit finer. But the gear inside is just a regular circular gear. It's not the super granular worm gear. So if you need the ultimate in fine pitch adjustment, it is that PRG for $150. But the PRGS is $90 and could still get the job done. However, there is another brand called Gabor, which has a model that's almost in between. Price-wise, is actually the least expensive. It's only $80 for the Gabor. Is the UPMP 1000 is the name of that one. But it does have a worm gear inside, like the PRG from Peerless does, except it's not quite as granular as the worm gear in the Peerless. So that's kind of why it's the in-between. It's not the circular gear of the PRG-S, although it costs less than that model. It does give you a worm gear. It's not quite as granular as the PRG. But given the price point, because the HT-3550, not a super expensive projector, that Gabor UPMP might just fit the bill, exactly what you want. $80.
Okay, does that mean you're done?
Yep.
Okay, good. Dan, I think the dog is knocking on the door. My wife's home, but she was quiet. But I think the dog is knocking on the door. I don't know why she wants to come in here. She doesn't want to be in here. Dan wants to connect a PS5 to an LG CX OLED, but with an HDMI cable run that is about 30 feet long. What are his options? Are there any certified ultra-high-speed HDMI cables that long? I would normally send you the Blue Jeans, but since there's no list on here about Blue Jeans, I'm guessing that doesn't exist.
No, not as of yet. And I do not know of any certified ultra-high-speed HDMI cables at that length. However, there are a number of fiber optic, 8K, HDMI 2.1, anything other than the actual ultra high speed, since that name is reserved for things that are certified, but they might call it like ultra HD high speed or ultra high speed 8K or something close to that. But yeah, to get to this length, 30 feet plus, it pretty much has to be fiber optic. The only certified ones, the longest lengths that I'm finding are 5 meters. So it's about 16 and a half feet. That's as long as certified ones that are copper go. So for this distance, I would definitely, take a chance on Monoprices. Monoprice does have a 48 gigabits per second rated fiber optic, 30-foot long HDMI cable. It's $155. So you are spending to get to this length, but there's not really much else other option. I did come across someone who had actually tested another brand fiber optic. This one is 33 feet. It's from Rui Pro, RUI Pro. That's the brand. That's one of the few that I actually could find someone had tested it and it worked.
Yeah, I see
passed. Yeah, so that one actually passed. It doesn't have the certification, but it functions. You don't have to have the certification for a cable to function, but you just don't have the little hologram and the QR code to scan it and get that. So that one's $170 for the 33-foot length. So we're not seeing any gigantic difference in price between Monoprice and Rui Pro, but fiber optic is the way you'll have to go.
Right. Okay. Yeah, definitely before you put it in a wall, connect everything up.
Yes, yeah.
Double check.
And yeah, buying from Amazon makes a lot of sense. The return will be easy if it doesn't work.
Yeah, generally speaking.
Yeah.
Every once in a while, so normally I can just return to my UPS store, which is really close and very convenient. They don't even want you to put it in a bag or a box anymore. They just want you to hand them the product for the most part.
Wow.
And they box it up for you. Yeah, it's very strange. When they started doing that, I was like, what?
Yeah.
But yeah, you put it back into like its original packaging, whatever that was, and they don't want you to like reseal it or anything. You just hand it to them. But then there's an Amazon like pickup drop off point that's not convenient at all. And every once in a while, some product I'll have, they're like, yeah, you got to go there. I'm like, really? Jack is constructing a false wall for his projection screen. Since he is building all of the framing himself, he decided to save some money. So rather than buying a complete screen with a pre-made frame, he just bought out the DIY screen material, center stage, ultra fine from Seymour AV. Good stuff.
Perfect.
Plus some black velvet to create a border, as well as some acoustically transparent black material to cover the rest of the false wall around the screen. One thing he didn't buy is a black backing layer to go behind the screen material. Pretty much everything else behind that false wall is black already, but should he have that black backing layer anyway? Is it necessary? What purpose does it serve? And could he add it later if he discovers he needs it? Well, I don't know. I mean, you're the one who's building the wall. Are you going to build yourself a way to get back there afterwards? Because that's the answer to that question. I don't know why you would need a black backing layer. I didn't think that that was a thing. I thought that it was just white on both sides, and that way. I mean, I don't know why you would need it, but
with the acoustically transparent screens, some light does get through. There are holes in the screens, and those holes are, if sound can get through, light can get through. Wavelengths of light are, you won't believe this, but they're shorter than sound wavelengths.
I know, weird, right? Physics, it's so strange.
So your naked eye from 10 feet away, it might not see those little holes, but light beams, they can still get through. Light will go through an acoustically transparent screen, and if the wall behind there is, gloss white, light's going to reflect off of that and then come back through the screen. It's going to wash out.
But he said everything was black back there anyway.
Well, that's the important factor, right? Yeah. Because that's exactly what I would have asked. Because I would have said, okay, are you leaving the wall behind there? Do you have a mirror back there? Because if you've got a mirror back there, you're going to want a black backing layer. In fact, you would want to take the mirror down. That's what you would really want to do. But if what's behind the acoustically transparent screen is already black and non-reflective, then you shouldn't really need the black backing layer. But that's what it's there for. It's if you put up an acoustically transparent screen in front of a white gloss wall and you didn't repaint the wall, that would wash out the image from the light that goes through the screen, off the white gloss wall, and back through the back of the screen. That's what it's there for.
But I mean, speaker grill cloth would be all you would need.
Oh, yeah.
And if you can get back there, I mean, you could do it in advance because what is it going to hurt? It's not going to hurt anything. I mean, or you could just leave it for later and see if you need it. If I was building that false wall, I just do it.
Sure.
Do it right
if
away.
What's behind your screen is black and non-reflective, I don't really think you'll need it from what he described.
Manny just got an Epson 5050 UB. He's using it with his 127-inch 2.35 to 1 aspect ratio screen. So it's the same width as a 134-inch 16:9. His screen is above a fireplace, which limits the maximum height of his screen. He would have gone 16:9 aspect ratio if that weren't the case. He knows he has to justify it.
That's right. He knows you were going to say something.
I didn't, though. I was good. His sources are his Xbox One, DirecTV 4K box, Panasonic Blu-ray player, and Apple TV 4K. Does he need to have different picture modes and settings for SDR versus HDR, 1080p versus 4K, gaming versus movies, and streaming versus discs and TV? I feel like we've answered this question before.
On an Epson 5050 UB? I'm pretty sure it's come up at some point in the past, but we don't mind revisiting the topic. What I would highly encourage you to do, Manny, projector reviews, specifically their reviews. They have one of the 5050 UB and one of the 6050 UB, which is the Epson Pro version of it, but the performance is nearly identical. And there's a few little details that they put into the 6050 UB review that weren't repeated in the 5050 UB review. So I would highly encourage you to read those full reviews, at least the whole picture quality sections in that, because there's some really good details that explain, in greater detail than we have time allowing to go through all of it. And I think you'd find it very beneficial to know exactly why you might want to do one approach versus another. So the bottom line is that with the Epson 5050 UB, it's one of the ones where the naming of the best picture mode is a little confusing, because the best picture mode it has is actually called natural, which is not intuitive because it has ones called cinema and digital cinema and bright cinema. And it's like, you would think normally it's going to be the picture mode that's called cinema of some sort. And there's got 3 of them that are called similar. But the best picture mode is natural, which is not going to necessarily know out of the box. So those reviews help you understand why that's the best picture mode. Now, the thing about natural picture mode is that it has exceedingly accurate Rec. 709 colors. It does not get to the full P3 color gamut that is used for HDR content. To get that, you would need to use either the cinema or digital cinema, and digital cinema is the one that is technically the most accurate. But with those picture modes, a physical filter actually gets put in front of the lamp, or in front of some part of the the light path. A physical filter goes in there that widens the colors. But as you can imagine, if you're putting a physical filter into the light path, it reduces the amount of light. It's bound to. The filter's going to do that. So it's a trade-off of, do you want the brightest image with the colors not being quite as wide as Rec 7 as DCI-P3, or do you want the widest possible colors that basically match DCI-P3, but then the image gets dimmer? And personally, I would just stick with the brightness. That's what I would go for. So my opinion is that I would pretty much end up leaving the Epson 5050 UB in the natural picture mode all the time. Because when it's a standard dynamic range signal, it's the natural mode. And when it's an HDR signal that's detected, it still says natural picture mode, but it's an HDR version of the natural picture mode. There is a change that's made, and you can have it automatically go between low and high lamp mode if you want to. It remembers that setting. And then as far as, putting the colors to still appear correct, it does that automatically. So yeah, unless you 100% care that the color width is the most important thing to you, and you're willing to take a significant, it's like a 40% hit on the brightness, and this is supposed to be for HDR, I'm like, I would leave it natural all the time. There is no dedicated game mode. In the natural picture mode, it has about 26, 27 milliseconds of lag, and that's just what you get. But that's pretty acceptable, especially for a projector. That's not, egregious amounts of latency. So my opinion is you can just leave it in that natural picture mode pretty much all the time. But if you want all the nitty-gritty details, Projector Reviews really goes into it. And in the 5050 UB review, they even have the full picture settings, like all the settings that they did for both natural picture mode and digital cinema mode, if what you want is the wide colors.
All right. When he first plugged his Apple TV 4K, I asked him right away if he wanted to use HDR. He remembered our advice about the Apple TV settings, and he chose SDR 60 Hz instead. Then he was faced with output either 444 or 420. With his current HDMI cable, 444 didn't seem to work, but 420 was fine. Is that okay? The answer is yes. It is fine.
It is okay, but it does make me question the current HDMI cable that you have, right, and whether it might run into some issues. Because the thing is, with the vast majority of streaming video content, it's going to be 24 hertz, it's going to be 10 bits maximum, and it is like what's coming into the Apple TV 4K is a 420 signal. So if that's what you output, and that should work fine even on just a high speed, not even premium high speed, just a high speed cable should be able to output that signal, you'll be okay. The times when you might get into an issue is if there is anything that's 4K 60 hertz and 444 like a game. I'm thinking specifically if you try to play a game on your Apple TV 4K on your projector and it tries to output that, your HDMI cable might not have the bandwidth to transmit it. It's making me think that might be the case. So for video, you're probably okay, but there's a chance that an HDMI cable replacement wouldn't be the worst idea.
All right. He's facing the same thing that several other AVRant listeners have mentioned recently. When he went to Netflix and started playing the HDR title, his screen went black for about 5 seconds. It does this for every movie, though, HDR or not. What causes that?
The frame rate switch.
Yeah, it's a lock-on thing.
It's the frame rate switch. Yeah. If it sounds like he followed our settings advice for the Apple TV 4K, match frame rate, match dynamic range. Right. So whenever there's a change, any change in the signal, whether it was from a resolution change, a frame rate change, an SDR versus HDR change, a color space change, it went from Rec 709 to Rec 2020. Any of those, there's going to have to be a reestablishment of the HDMI handshake, and the Epson projector takes about 5 seconds to relock onto the signal. So that's what's causing that. If it super duper bothers you, it's the same thing we've said to other people. You have to not turn on the match feature. No more match frame rate, no more match dynamic range. Now everything will be HDR all the time, and it'll always be 60 hertz, which means you might see some judder. So pick your poison. It's either the video is not exactly what it should be. It's not the actual frame rate and dynamic range that's coming in, but you don't get the screen blanking, or you do get the screen blanking, but you get to enjoy the correct frame rate and dynamic range.
Okay. The picture is very sharp, but it seems dark. Too dark. It seems like HDR is a bit complicated, and he wasn't entirely expecting to have to fiddle with the settings so much. So as far as Epson 5050 UB itself, it can do 18 gigabits per second can it do 18 gigabits per second and truly handle HDR? Does he need the new HDMI cable? Does he need specific HDR picture settings? So this is part and parcel with a new technology that is taking a while for everybody to kind of wrap their heads around. We're seeing all these weird setting issues. This happened when we went from SDR to HDR. It went it went from from 1080p to 4K. There's just when different frame rates. There's always something that it just takes a while for the manufacturers to kind of catch up and get the settings right, and you can blame that on long lead times. They're especially like AV receivers. The AV receiver they're building now, you're not going to buy for 2 or 3 more years. So they're dealing with a technology that's new currently, and they have to anticipate how users are going to want to use it 3 years from now. So that's part of what's going on here. But give it a year or two, and things will start to be a lot more intuitive. But it's going to take some time.
But I mean, chances are, obviously, I wouldn't blame anybody who either took the 50/50 out of the box and just used the out of the box and said, okay, I'm not really sure what my settings ought to be, so I'm going to give this a try, or put it in cinema mode, because I definitely wouldn't blame anybody for intuitively thinking that cinema mode would be the most accurate mode. In most displays it is. This is a weird outlier. And yeah, like I mentioned, cinema or digital cinema puts that filter in the light path, cuts your light output significantly. So I'm betting that's all it was. I'm betting you put it in the natural mode and let it do its HDR thing. You're going to go, okay. The thing is, on a screen that's the equivalent size of a 135-inch, you're not going to see a big difference between SDR and HDR anyway. You just aren't. You're already up against the sort of limits of the Epson 50/50 as long as you're keeping the colors accurate. You're sort of against the limits of how bright it can get. It doesn't have a whole lot more brightness to give you in HDR versus SDR.
He's got a really big screen. I mean, basically, it's a 135-inch diagonal for a 16:9, or even a little bit bigger, which is right at the upper limits of what you expect a home theater projector to be able to do.
Yeah. So do not expect HDR to dazzle you with spectacular brightness compared to standard dynamic range. It's just not going to happen. But what we care about is detail. We care about seeing all the detail. The HDR images contain more detail in them than SDR. So there's putting it in natural mode, I think, is going to solve a lot of your issues. Like I said, getting a new HDMI cable, from the sounds of it, wouldn't be the worst idea. It seems like you probably don't have an 18 gigabit per second HDMI cable on hand right this second. And then the last one is right on the Epson's remote, there is an HDR button, and that brings up a 16-point slider. And that lets you raise or lower the brightness of the image. You're actually sort of going along a gamma slider, but it lets you, if you're watching something that's HDR and you're like, everything on this HDR title is way too dark, or conversely, everything in this HDR title, the highlights are just blown out. Like, I think there should be some detail in there. It just looks like a big wash of white. Well, you can move that slider. And it is one button press on the remote to bring it up, so it's handy. And you can move that slider and either raise those shadows or lower the brightness that the detail in the blown out whites comes back. So that's really handy to have on a projector.
Okay. Ari. Last week we got a bit confused about the room size that Ari is dealing with for his theater. It's 11.5 by 15.5 by 6'8", and it's got a door, so it can be enclosed. Mm-hmm. The room is not 100% dedicated to just being a theater. It'll be sort of a family room, too, as far as the home theater performance goes. He's going to care about the sound quality the most, so it isn't really vital to have perfect... He's going to care about the sound quality the most, so it isn't really vital to have perfect bass response everywhere in the room. Well, dude, you don't get to pick what part of your room gets the perfect bass response. I hate to break it to you.
No, but he's saying one seat. It's fine if it's good in one seat and not everywhere else.
Okay. If it's just his seat that gets the best bass, that's okay. And he doesn't consider himself a bass head. He doesn't need to rattle the whole neighborhood. He just wants a nice solid foundation for movies and music. So price and size-wise, a single SVS SB1000 Pro would be very attractive. Now that we understand the room and setup that he's dealing with, what are our thoughts on that? Let me explain a little bit about bass. And I understand what you're saying. Mm-hmm. Okay. I understand what you're saying. You're like, if I can buy a single subwoofer that's a little bit smaller and put it closer to me to where I'm sitting, then if the bass is, weak in the other half of the room, that's fine. I don't care about that. I only care about the bass that's right in my one seat. Unfortunately, that's not how bass works, especially not in an enclosed room the way that you've got this thing set up. So what you're saying is you're not a bass head. You just want a nice solid foundation of even bass across your seat, in your seat, so that it's nice and even, and you don't care if it's even everywhere else. But the reality is you do care if it's everywhere else, because as you move around that room, you're going to get massive differences in bass response if you have a single subwoofer that's placed good for your seat. Let me explain. I was testing those AT-3 speakers last week, and here's a little preview, all right? I was playing bass sweeps, 100 hertz down to, I don't remember what it went down to, but I stopped it at around 20. I was just playing these bass sweeps over and over again, and then I played the bass sweep, and I would move the speakers like a foot and a half into the room and then play the bass sweep again, okay? The difference in just that foot and a half movement, like 10 hertz difference in where the suckouts and the boosts were. Like if they were at 40 in one spot, they were at 50 in another spot. So we're talking massive, and at some frequencies, literally zero bass.
Sure.
Like none. Like it did not exist. And then at other ones, you're like, okay, my eyeballs are starting to vibrate. Okay, that's
full
not good.
Cancellation versus 30 decibel boost.
Right. So if you have uneven bass for everywhere else except for your seat, it is unenjoyable for everyone else in the room as they move around the room.
Yeah, kids are playing in the back of the room. You're enjoying a movie at the front of the room.
Sounds great to you.
Yeah.
But they can't hear it themselves talk.
Right.
So, and then what I would do is I would switch on the mains plus sub. Basically, it was still a direct mode, but it was giving me the bass management, and
it's duplicating the bass out of the front speakers and the subwoofer.
The subs made it all of a sudden even bass. The sweep all the way down made it nice and even. That is exactly what you want as you are sitting in your seat, and unfortunately it's what you want everywhere else in your room as well, or it's going to be unenjoyable for people. So I understand what you're saying. You're thinking to yourself, if I can just one sub, I can save some money, I can get a smaller one, I can put it close to me. Yeah, the rest of the people in that room are not going to be real happy with you, but you're going to enjoy the heck out of it. Everybody else is going to be like, ugh.
I will say an enclosed 11.5 by 15.5 room with a low ceiling, SP1000 Pro in terms of sheer output is a perfectly fine choice.
Should be fine, yeah. And you can hit 20 hertz with that thing, so that's fine too. Yeah. Just get two of them.
Especially if you put it, close to a wall or especially a corner. But if you had one of them and put it in a corner, it's like, yeah, the raw output, no problem whatsoever, but the response that you're going to get, is going to be wildly different from spot to spot in that room. So, I'm in agreement. If I had a small enclosed room and I'm the only listener, I still want two subwoofers. If I'm literally the only person ever in that room, you could probably get away with one subwoofer in that instance. But when this is a room that's going to be somewhat multi-purpose and there are going to be other people in there, getting the two subs, it's a better experience for you, the listener, regardless. And then it's also, a huge benefit to everyone else who might be in the room at the same time. But the choice of the model, the SP1000 Pro, that's a perfectly fine choice. So, if it's a matter of you can only afford one right now, we're not going to tell you that's horrible, but try to get a second one in the future. That would be great. But that's a good model for this room size.
The thought process is very clear. The thought process is very clear, and I understand it. But experience, I hate saying this, and I didn't say it in the review, but I brought my wife in here to listen to this so that she could hear the difference between having the two subs on versus this is why we have two subwoofers in here. And she's like, well, can I leave now? I'm like, okay. I try to care about your crap. I try to care. You telling me about these people that are having problems and they're talking to you about it, and I'm supposed to care about these people I don't even know and their stupid problems, and you won't even listen to the bass in the home theater. Meet me halfway, woman. You every one of you played that for your wives. Go on, play it right now, because believe me, they need to hear it.
Oh man,
we're trying.
Yes,
we're trying to meet you.
We're trying to not get people in trouble too much, but this time we must, apparently.
We must. Gotta stand up for ourselves, men. We've been trampled on too long.
Oh, God. Oh no.
Fight for your right for bass.
We're going to end up with some weird recommendations on YouTube after including that little bit of
Listen,
phrasing.
That's going to be it's going to be liked by all the wrong people. Infinite Gary. Gary owns 3 pairs of Dyne Audio Focus 110A. I'm going to say it that way because it's a stupid number. Self-powered speakers. They're a discontinued model, but Gary picked up some extras on the used market because he likes them a lot. But liking them a lot was not enough. He had to go and read some reviews online. Why, Gary? Just why?
So that he'd have something to ask us.
What Hi-Fi has said in a review from 12 years ago. So... What Hi-Fi
British
has
publication.
A review. Yeah, has a review. Overall is positive, point out resolution and fine detail as strong points, but they also describe them as being speakers for people who prefer a warm bath to a cold shower. Oh, shut up. And under the negatives, they say these speakers are tonally quite cosseting?
Cosseting, yes.
That's like corset. Isn't a corset like a corset thing? Is that what a corset is?
No.
What is a corset?
Corset, it's like coddling. Like overprotective. Yeah, if someone is corseted, they are overprotected.
Rich and smooth, but not rapid. He's never come across the term tonally cosseting before. What does it mean? It means that dude was running out of things to say. Okay,
he had a word of the day calendar or
thesaurus. And he got points for using it. I'm telling you.
Yeah, look, what Hi-Fi is? It's your stereotypical British audiophile publication. Yeah. Like it's all but useless. I have no patience or use for anything that they write, unfortunately. And hey, you know what? Maybe I'll bring on all the flames for this episode, and everyone will forget about what Tom said in that last question. It'll now be me saying that what Hi-Fi is not a trusted resource for reviews. It's pure subjectivity. It's them trying to impress you with their language.
This is also from 12 years ago. Let's be honest.
Well,
Nobody was measuring. Hardly anybody was measuring stuff 12 years ago, except for us, and that none of that makes any sense whatsoever. They come up with
such BS. The stuff they describe is just useless. So look, if it were like someone who only reviews things subjectively and they were trying to get across some type of indication of the sound quality. I mean, I suppose this comes closest to mentioning something about transient response. Words like smooth versus rapid. It could be some of that. It also might just indicate a bit of a high frequency roll off, because whenever they talk about things like rich and warm, that's very often just that there's more mid bass than treble. But then again, these are the types of people that they don't pay any attention to their room acoustics.
Not
it
only
all
that,
just came from the speakers and the cables attached to those speakers.
Yes, and then a lot of that is in comparison to what they were listening to before. So if they own a different pair of speakers that are totally very bright and revealing, maybe you would call them harsh. They're going to be like, oh, these Focals or whatever they are. I don't remember what speakers they are. Or totally laid back. Yeah. Dyne Audio, same thing. Totally laid back and whatever. Who cares? Don't listen to this crap. Don't worry.
No, this you can ignore. If you like him, and look, Gary has listened to a lot of stuff, a lot of times, and tweaked things like crazy. Like, dude, if you like these speakers, you do not need permission from What Hi-Fi of all places.
Audioholics is continuing their YouTube discussions about room acoustics, and Matthew Pose went into detail about certain ITU, EBU, AES, etc. standards for control rooms and testing rooms, and the notion of trying to use any of those for listening enjoyment. Gary wanted to ask about one comment in particular in which Matthew was talking about how multi-channel recordings include and reproduce much of the acoustics of the recording space, and therefore, if your room is very heavily treated, what anybody would agree as being a dead-sounding room, that's okay for those recordings because the ambience and the reflections of the original room are part of the recordings. But for a lot of two-channel recordings, a totally dead room doesn't make sense unless you use an up mixer 100% of the time. That made Gary wonder, would that actually work? In his experience, he doesn't think a totally dead room makes sense under any circumstances. To him, even with multi-channel recordings, it still sounds a bit weird unless there are some reflections in the listening room. And using an up mixer on two-channel recordings doesn't necessarily sound the same as a recording that was multi-channel to begin with. What are our thoughts? Heavily treated by dead What?
Well,
what is this?
While Tom is sorting through, I'll give my take on this because I'm pretty sure I understand where Matthew Pose was coming from, and it's something that we've touched upon ages ago. But by all means, I don't mind talking about it again. And it is the fact that, look, recordings are not all made the same way. Particularly in studio music recordings, you'll have a lot of them that were done close mic'd, right? They put the instrument alone in a heavily treated room, and the microphone is right there. You can even see it where they attach the microphone to the instrument, or the vocalist is in a vocal booth and the microphone is right in front of them, and they're capturing nothing but the direct sound of the instrument or voice. And then that is reproduced through your speaker system with essentially no indication, no reverb, no reflections, nothing to indicate the room that it was recorded in. It's like this disembodied voice all by itself. And you play that in your room, and it can create the illusion that you have brought that instrument or that vocalist into your room. Right? The sound is coming out of your speaker as a direct sound. It's interacting with your room, and it sounds like that instrument was brought into your room. That's the illusion that you're trying to create. Now, you go to a recording of, let's say, a live concert where they put, 2 or more microphones out where the audience would be. And then the instruments and the voices, they're up on the stage, and it's just like you're recording the performance from the audience perspective. And those microphones are capturing all the ambience of the venue where that recording is taking place, and then all of that, including that ambience, is in the recording, and it's played out of your speakers. Now, you play that out of your speakers, and the idea is to transport you out of your listening room and into the venue where the recording was made. Well, you can sometimes, if your room has no treatments at all, you're in a highly reflective room, you can get these, counteracting cues. You get reflections that were recorded at the venue being played and then reflected again off of your own walls and ceiling and floor, and that can sometimes mix up your brain. So you've got these two different things. Are we trying to bring the instruments and voices into our room, whatever our room might be, or are we trying to transport ourselves to another location? And of course, in most movies, the idea is that you don't want the sense that you're in your home room. You want the sense that you're whatever they're showing you on screen, that's what you want to get. And there's this idea that once you have surround sound and you have these ambient cues that are mixed into your surround speakers, or even if it's just stereo playback, but it's playing back these recorded reflections and ambient cues, that you want your room to be, more on the dead side for those, so that you aren't getting conflicting reflection information, and that lets you transport yourself to that venue, versus the recordings that are all close mic'd, where if your room is more to the dead side than the live side, well, it sounds like you brought that voice or instrument into a padded room, because that's exactly what you did. So there is that difference. It's not necessarily that there's a one size fits all. But Matthew's basically saying, if all you listen to is multi-channel recordings, or you use an up mixer all the time, then having your room closer to the dead side than the live side, that'll probably be okay, because you're getting those ambient cues and those reflections. Those are being played at you from your sound system. And what your room is doing to the sound, you kind of want to ameliorate your own room. So, yeah.
Well, I guess I would say I would always lean towards the dead room than the live room. Always. I mean, and you can just think about it from a headphone perspective, right? When you put on headphones, do you ever think to yourself, I wish I had some more reflections of my room inside the headphones. And the actuality is no. The whole point of the headphone is that it isolates you from everything else. So do you need to have, and that's why we just spent a whole bunch of time talking about how important absorption was. And the reason is because we're trying to get you into a room that's literally closer to that mixing environment, which is a fairly dead
pretty
space.
dead. But then this is sort of taking it to the opposite extreme.
Right.
Which is he's saying, totally dead room. Okay, if you're listening to a recording that has lots of that ambient and reflected information in the recording, and that's all being played at you, then in a totally dead room, that will still probably sound okay because you're getting that information. You're being transported out of that totally dead room. And then Gary's like, well, okay, but what, like, particularly the comment about using an up mixer, because let's say you apply an up mixer to a 2-channel recording and the 2-channel recording is only close mic'd sounds. There's nothing for the up mixer to use to extract ambience and reflections from just that. So
a whole lot.
So it wouldn't. Yeah, it wouldn't be putting a lot into the up mixer. Wouldn't have a lot to work with. It's not going to be able to create ambient and reflections from something that truly didn't exist in the recording. So, I mean, I'm more on Gary's side. I wouldn't have a totally dead room. That doesn't make sense to me. I wouldn't have an anechoic chamber for a listening room. I want some amount, but yeah, I lean more towards like, if it's just a room and I'm walking in, I would go, yeah, this room is more to the dead side than the highly reflective side. But I'm mostly caring about movies. I mostly want to be transported out of the room. But I agree with Gary. I wouldn't go totally dead in any circumstance.
Dennis has a Marantz SR6014 with the 5.2.4 speaker configuration. He's using his Marantz to power the front 3 speakers, while an external amp powers the surrounds and 4 overhead speakers. Since he is only using 3 channels of the Marantz built-in amplifiers, could he assign 2 of the Marantz amp channels to zone 2 and use those to power some bass shakers? I mean, that's theoretically possible. I don't see why not.
So
6014. 6014. You might need to only be able to do that with an analog source. Would that be your issue?
Well, first the good news. The Marantz 6014 is the sister model of the Denon X3600. Okay. And those were the only 2 models in 2019 that let you continue playing surround sound in your main zone and then create a 2-channel down mix of that same source to come out of zone 2. So you're in luck. You got one of the only 2 AV receiver models from Denon and Marantz from that model year that can actually, at least signal-wise, do what you want to do. So hooray, Dennis doesn't have to buy a new AV receiver. But there's one little detail about what he's asking, because I get what he's saying. Okay, I'm only using 3 of the built-in amps of the Marantz. My other 6 channels are being amplified externally. So I've got 6 other amplifiers built into this Marantz. Can I assign 2 of those to zone 2? The issue is that you still have to do the amp assign as a 9.1 system for your main zone, because otherwise it's going to top out at 7 channels plus zone 2. And you still want to have 5.2.4 in your theater, I'm assuming. You don't want to reduce that down to 5.2.2. So you still have to assign it as a 9.1 in the main zone. Now, what you absolutely can do is, say, your front heights or top fronts, power those with your Marantz now. Right? Because there's no reason why you can't. Both the pre-outs and the amplifiers are hot. So if you don't want to power your surrounds, you want to continue powering those externally, okay, but power your top fronts with the Marantz, and the 2 external amplifier channels that were previously powering your front heights, your top fronts, those power your bass shakers now, right? You take the zone 2 pre-outs from your Marantz and plug it into 2 channels of your external amplification, and that powers your bass shakers. That'll work. So this is just a matter of, you do need to use the zone 2 pre-outs, but you definitely have enough amplifiers on hand. You don't need to buy anything. You just need to connect the zone 2 pre-outs to 2 of your external amplifiers. Let those power your bass shakers, and that'll work. Power 5 of your speakers with the Marantz.
The specs for the 6014 say 110 watts per channel to 8 ohms, 2 channels driven. So how much power are they sending to each of his front 3 speakers? The exact amount of power they need to get as loud as the content wants. So
yep.
Yeah, it's not. There is not a constant amount of power that's constantly going to your speakers.
Right.
110 watts to 8 ohms, 2 channels driven. It's not. They're not always getting 110 watts. They're getting probably 1 or maybe 2 watts most of the time because that's what they need. Yeah. And occasionally they're getting a whole bunch, and because they need to get real loud for a short period of time.
Sure.
So I can't tell you. I can't tell you because I don't know, because it depends on what content's being played.
Yeah, so look, theoretically, any single amplifier channel, if it were the only channel playing in that given moment, that Marantz can deliver in the order of 230, 240 watts for a short amount of time to a single amplifier channel, nothing else being powered. That's sort of where, that's just where the output transistors of the amplifiers saturate, right, and they can't allow any more power than that through. But it's about 230, 240 watts. It's right in that ballpark. And then the back of the napkin math for, okay, what is the pool of power available from this Marantz receiver? If you take that 2 channels driven, you've got 110 watts each. So it can do that all day long. 220 watts. It can do all day long. And then the back of the napkin math is take 25% of that, right? So about, 27.5 watts, right? And multiply that by the remaining channels. So there's 7 additional amplifier channels in there. So it's 27.5 times 7, and add that all together, and you're just north of 400 watts after that. That's basically what that Marantz has available to deliver. So if you were in some situation where you had identical signals going to your front 3 speakers all at exactly the same time, but those are the only 3, right? You're not sending to anything else, just those 3. Could it deliver 110 watts to all 3 of those simultaneously? Yeah, it very well, it should be able to. By the napkin math, it absolutely should be able to. It's got about 400 watts to work with in total. Could it deliver 110 to 3 channels simultaneously? Yeah, it could.
All right. Who do we have left?
Yeah. Oh, really? We're not going to do the last question?
No, we gotta go.
Here's the last question. Tom.
I
we have Tom
scrolled
H.
up. And it's a long question. I looked at it. It's long. So
I had no idea we weren't going to get to all questions this week.
We're not. We're going to save one for next week. So
all right. Tom H is on the list. Sorry, Tom H.
Sorry. Trying to upstage me, buddy. You should have got to get a different name. Call you not Tom. That's what I'm going to call you.
He was even someone who was grateful we kept the podcast going, and now we're making
probably not so grateful right now, are you?
It could be.
That's what you get for talking out of turn.
Patreon number's going to go down again.
What any of that means. I'm just over caffeinated at this point. All right, let's thank our listeners of the week. We want to thank our 123 patrons over at patreon.com.
Indeed, patreon.com/AVRant podcast for anyone who would like to sign up for an automatic monthly donation. And thank you very much to our 123 patrons over there.
We want to thank you to Manny for talking us up the silver ticket, as well as not Tom for his note of gratitude for keeping the podcast going. And apparently I'm going to say happy birthday to Andy and his Maggie, daughter Maggie. How you doing?
That's everybody. Manny, thanks for talking us up to silver ticket. And thanks very much to Tom, Andy, and Maggie for bringing a smile, at least to my face. Tom has no idea what was going on with the Andy and Maggie situation, but brought a smile to my face. So I appreciate that. Very much thankful to everyone for the notes of encouragement and just for continuing to listen and send in your questions. It is wonderful. Thank you.
That's right. This is AVRant, the podcast that answers your home theater and AV questions. If you want your question answered, just ask us at question@avrant.com. For AVRant, I'm Tom Antry.
And I'm Rob H. Now stay in and listen to something.
Want your question answered? Send it to question@avrant.com. This is AVRant.
Now go out and listen to something.